All right, Sam Howell being traded to the Seattle Seahawks. So we thought we'll do a quick midday emergency podcast of the Sports on Tap Seattle podcast. As always, quickly, I'm with you. I'm Sammy.
And I'm George. Welcome on into the show.
Like and subscribe, follow us, do whatever, share with a friend, and let's talk about this trade, George, because this is what the people want to hear about today, is the Seahawks have traded. We receive, that's a better way to put it, we received Sam Howell with a 4th round pick, number 102, a 6th round pick, 107, or 179, sorry. And the Commanders received a 3rd and a 5th. So we pretty much swapped a 3rd and a 5th for a 4th and a 6th, and we get Sam Howell. And as we were talking about before the show, you have a little bit of a different perspective on this than me. So go ahead and share your perspective, and I'll get to mine second. You're listening to the Sports on Tap Seattle podcast. I'm Sammy, and with me, as always, is my older brother, George.
Your favorite place to be a fan of Seattle sports. Now let's get this party started.
Tito, are you ready? Are you ready? You ready?
I'm like almost 100% sure on my perspective. And I'm usually not that I'm usually more curious. Honestly, this is a move for a backup quarterback, plain and simple. I don't think there's anything more than him being a backup quarterback. That's the only thing this move is. And honestly, if Sam Howell played tight end, this would almost be like a non-story. But anytime a quarterback that is starting or backup caliber moves in the NFL, people want to talk about it because it's the most important position in sports. So Sam Howell will not be, look, Geno could get hurt. Geno could play really bad, and then the team goes bad and Howell's in there. I just think this is a move for a backup quarterback. But I think it opens up questions, though, about the draft. That's the only thing I think that's important here, like you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, it definitely, I think I take it slightly different, I guess. For me, they essentially are saying that this is also kind of cutting off the fact that they're not trading for Justin Fields, which maybe nobody's fucking trading for Justin Fields, which I'm like, maybe no one is, right? Maybe he's stuck as the backup in Chicago next year. I don't know what's going to happen now because every team that he was like on the radar for either got a quarterback and their backup. So it's a very odd situation there. There is two ways to look at it. Like you said, one is it could be just a backup move. He's like $1 million on the cap pretty much, which Drew Lock would have been $4 or $5 million. So he is slightly cheap, a lot more cheap, the $3 million cheaper than Drew Lock.
And it'd be a high end backup.
Yeah, well, that's what I was getting to. I was saying he's also better than Drew Lock. So, Drew Lock hasn't really had a season maybe with as much upside as Sam Howell had. Now, the issue is Sam Howell throws a lot of picks, right? But if you took away 8 or 9 of his picks last year, he had essentially 4,000 yards, 21 picks, and 21 touchdowns. If he had 4,000 yards, which was more, he had more passing yards than Geno Smith, right? If he had 4,000 yards, 21 touchdowns, in 9 picks, which he didn't, I understand that, but if he reduced the interceptions, all of a sudden Sam Howell's name would have been a lot higher on people's boards than it was. He's actually a pretty decent quarterback. He has a pretty good arm. He's a decent talent. So I think there is something here potentially future-wise. I do think it is Geno Smith's job, though. And that's where the interesting part is. It is Geno Smith's job, but there are scenarios in the NFL where it's somebody's job until it's not, right? As John Schneider said, it is Geno Smith's the starter until he's not. Geno Smith is going to be 34 or 35 next year. Sam Howell's a young guy in his early 20s who threw for 4,000 yards with 21 touchdowns. And in all honesty, would have a better supporting cast in Seattle than he did in Washington. So you just never know what comes out of all of it. I think, last year we did see Drew Lock actually play 2 games, right? Or 1 full game, whatever it was, because of the Geno
game and a
Smith
half,
injury.
basically, Yeah, injuries could totally happen, and that happens in the NFL, so you need a backup quarterback. I mean, it's convenient to say, right? Like, if you would just get rid of his picks, but we've been saying that about Jameis Winston his whole career, and Jameis Winston's still a backup quarterback in the NFL, unfortunately, because you know how much I like Jameis Winston. But guys who throw picks tend to throw interceptions. That's not something you just learn to stop throwing. He's just Sam Howell's Sam Howell. He's a backup quarterback in the NFL. I'm not like poo-pooing the move because I think with the amount of injuries, I mean, how many quarterbacks did we see last year? Like 46 different starting quarterbacks around the NFL because of injuries. Like, we're in a league where it's more likely now with the amount of injuries we see that you will probably have a game or two where your backup quarterback plays. More than half the teams last year had two quarterbacks start a game. So in general, like, yeah, I just think he's a backup quarterback, but that doesn't mean I don't find the move valuable. And like you said, I mean, you're getting a backup quarterback who probably is I don't know if he's better than Drew Lock or about the same as Drew Lock, but about 20% the price of what Drew Lock got in New York. So overall, it's if you're going to call it a net positive or a net negative move, it's a net positive move in any way and shape you look at it.
Yeah, I mean, I do think you're slightly undervaluing the aspect that he's not Drew Lock. He's a lot better than Drew Lock. He was 12th in the NFL in passing yards last year. So,
doesn't mean anything these days.
He had more passing yards. Yes, it does. He had more passing yards.
Drew Lock was a second-round pick for a reason. I mean, Sam Howell was what round was Sam Howell drafted in? Like, Drew Lock's potential was there. Drew Lock was a starter in Denver for just as long as Sam Howell was a starter for the Commanders. Like, Drew Lock, Sam Howell is not a better quarterback than Drew Lock.
As of right now, he is. He had a starting job last year, and he had 3,900 yards and 21 touchdowns. I mean, I'm just saying that he had more passing yards in 17 games than Derek. Can I just say something? I'm just trying to tell you about, the guy had more passing yards than Derek Carr and Jalen Hurts and Justin Herbert. I know Justin Herbert missed some games.
Jameis Winston led the league in passing yards and hasn't had a starting job since.
I understand.
That doesn't mean anything.
What you're not understanding is that you can't compare Jameis Winston or other people to a guy who played one full season. That's like saying Peyton Manning couldn't be in the NFL after his rookie year because he threw 30 picks. He's played one season.
Was the best prospect.
Yeah, that's
I'm just saying Sam Howell. No, I'm just saying, we're going to agree to disagree here. So what do you think? Sam Howell's better than Drew Lock and he's just going to compete for the starting job? I'd be super surprised. I don't think he's a starter in the NFL. I think there's a reason the Commanders don't. Who's the Commanders quarterback right now? They don't even have a quarterback and they're willing to give up Sam Howell.
Correct. But that happens to a lot of teams, right? I mean, that he was better than a guy like Kenny Pickett last year, who a team gave who they're saying is going to maybe compete with Russell Wilson, right? He's played better than he played better than a lot of other starting quarterbacks in the NFL. I mean, in terms of, I guess, if you consider the fact that he was healthy for 17 games as well, which makes a difference in this league. But I think at the end of the day, you can't just say it's nothing, because I think he has some upside. And that's the thing is, I don't think this move was just made to say, hey, you're just being thrown away. Let me just actually try to hear me out for a second. He had 3,900 yards, 21 touchdowns. I know the picks were bad. 21 picks is bad. But on top of that, he ran for 263 yards with 5 touchdowns. So, I mean, he is all-purpose at almost 4,300 yards and 26 touchdowns on the season, which is a lot higher level than just a crappy backup, right? He is a fringe starter, if not the close to the end half starter. So I'm not saying he's absolutely some legend that's going to take the job from Geno. What I'm saying is, if you look at, he had passing yards wise only 100 less than Trevor Lawrence and Baker Mayfield, right? And so I think at the end of the day, he had the same amount of touchdowns as Trevor Lawrence last year. He's not an awful quarterback by any means, and that's why I think there is something here. He's 23 years old with a big arm and some upside, and Geno's on the last year of his contract. So I think there's just a slight more to it than the idea of he's just going to camp as you do not even compete for the job.
when you're losing every single game, you're going to put up 3,900 yards no matter what happens when you don't run the ball at all and you're playing from behind all game long. And like I said, it's a net positive. Like I mean, you can, like I told you, it's a good trade. We get a guy that's a backup quarterback in the league, but he's just a backup quarterback in the league. I don't know what to tell you more than that. Like maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Sam Howell becomes a starter for a year. If he does, we're going to go 5-12. Like that's what Sam Howell is. He's just not a good. He's like you said at best. So that's exactly what I think. At best, he's one of the worst starters in the NFL, and at his best, he's a good backup quarterback. That is Sam Howell, and it's a good trade.
At best, he's like what Geno Smith was last year. So this is where that's why I think that his ceiling is like Geno Smith's season last year. And Geno Smith's season wasn't bad and it wasn't very good. It wasn't like his 2022 season, right? His 2022 season was top 10 in the NFL type of season. So, I mean, I still think he's a backup, but I do think it provides something. And I think it provides somewhat of a it might be, this is actually a good example. It might be as dumb as the whole Drew Lock, Geno Smith competition 2 years ago, where there was, I guess, a lot of people that believed in it, right? And including us, and it was clearly not a competition. Yeah. And it was clearly not a competition, right? And that might be the same scenario in this situation where there's going to be some people like in my type of camp that think, hey, it's probably a little bit of a competition. The people that believe in Howell, it was the same thing with Drew Lock, right? When he came in, it was like we all thought it was a competition, and it ended up really not being one. I think it might be the same type of scenario, but I do think there are going to be a few people in that, in that Sam Howell camp of there's somewhat of a competition. And when I say competition, I do not mean like it's his job to win. I mean it would have to be like his job to win and Geno's job to lose, like something catastrophic. But I do think
I would not be
something.
shocked. Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked if Sam Howell's our third quarterback heading into the season next year.
You think they traded 2 picks and traded back in the draft twice? Yes, they traded back 24 spots twice to get Sam Howell. You think they did that for him to be the third string?
He could be the third string quarterback next year. I would not be surprised if Sam Howell's the third string quarterback next year. And they're trading back in the draft because they're guaranteeing they're having a backup quarterback next year. There is no guarantee that the quarterback they want in the draft falls to them in the draft or they get him in the draft, right? Like there's no guarantees. I think we saw this and we talked about this in their podcast on the podcast yesterday that they might have thought they were going to do certain things in free agency and it didn't work out. They could also think they're going to get a quarterback at the 16th pick or the second round pick and that quarterback doesn't fall to them. And they can't go into the season with Geno Smith and no backup quarterback. And at $1.2 million and to move back, they didn't give up. They got 2 picks back for Howell, correct?
Yeah,
am I correct on that or no?
And
yeah, but it's not like they gave up. Yeah, they did move back, but they didn't like lose 2 picks. They moved back.
Correct, but
okay, yeah, I'm just making sure I was right about that.
I know. I just think your numbers are off a little bit because we don't have a second round pick, and we traded the third round pick to move to the 4th round for Sam Howell. So like we are talking about the 16th pick. And now we gave up our 3rd round to move back to the 4th round. So we are we're from 16 to 102. There's no picks. So unless we're getting it, so I just feel like this
they'll
was
probably be picks. They'll find picks.
I'm just saying this is I think this was their 3rd round quarterback that they're acquiring. I'm just going to go off of a tweet as well by Corbin Smith. I thought was interesting that I kept for this podcast. He said, as I wrote earlier today before the deal went down, he wrote an article about this being a potential trade. He said, I was told John Schneider was smitten all over Howell before the 2022 draft. This does not surprise me at all. So I will say that there is some confirmation that this was somebody that John Schneider loves. And you never know how these guys work. So, some of these GMs also. And there could be a GM that's just as or what's a good way to put it? There's some GMs that are enthusiastic about guys, even if there's no like some people think it's ridiculous.
Right.
To be
no, totally. Like, yeah, absolutely.
You never know if John Schneider.
And John
is just
Schneider
like a guy
knows
that
more
believes in
football than I've ever like known in my life. So like I totally get it. Like that's I mean, it's amazing. I'm glad that they went after this. Like if that's what he wanted, like you go get your quarterback. But I'm just saying I wouldn't be surprised if he's our third quarterback heading into this season. I'm not saying he will be. I just said I wouldn't be surprised.
It's interesting. No, I'm not. Actually, this is one of those things that we have no answers to, and we're never going to know.
No
but until it happens,
we'll know at the end of the
yeah. I would be surprised. I'd be actually very surprised because I think at this point and where we're at in the draft, unless we take somebody with that 16th pick, which I think we're not going to at this point. I don't know why we would trade for Sam Howell right now. If you think Geno's the starter and Sam Howell has nothing to do but being a backup, I don't know why they wouldn't have waited to see if they got their guy at 16 before making a trade for a backup. And then if they do get a guy at 16, fine. Sam Howell will probably be the third string, I guess, technically. But if they get anybody fourth round and beyond, I wouldn't even be surprised if that guy is the third string and Sam Howell is still the second string. I mean, Sam Howell has one full season as a starter and showed upside. And if I told you Sam Howell threw for 4,000 yards, rushed for 300, had 21 passing touchdowns, 5 rushing touchdowns, and I told you he had 12 picks instead of 21 picks, I feel like his value would be so much more towards like a Baker Mayfield, who's pretty much had the same numbers except for the picks. So it's like that's where I would probably, like have him at if he had not the picks issue. But he does have the picks issue. And we have to, the only way that we're not going to know unless he starts if that's something that can be reduced in his career or not. But that's where it gets interesting. I don't know. I genuinely think this is there's actually some more juice to this move.
Yeah, well, hope maybe. Who knows? I mean, either way, I think it's a net positive. Like I said, I just don't think this is much of any. I think it's a lot of smoke and not a lot of fire to this move in general. But we never know. Like, really, I have no idea. I could be totally wrong. But
I don't know.
I would say I'm very confident.
10 seconds, I don't even know what you said.
You too. That was weird. I was saying I just feel very, very confident that this is nothing more than a backup quarterback. That's what I feel. And I could come back and bite me, come back and clip this, whoever's listening, if he does become a starting quarterback for the Seahawks. But I'm very confident in saying Sam Howell's only way seeing the football field as a starter is through injury for this team.
Yeah. I think he has true upside on a bad team last year, and I think there's a chance. But I don't know. I'm actually going to be really interested to see when we get the first, what's it called? The first resemblance of John Schneider talking about this or somebody talking about this trade, because it does.
That's true. That would be very I think that's really important to know as well. Like, what does the team actually have to say about this?
I just want you to see this. All right, George. Okay. Can you see the screen?
Yes.
All right. Total touchdowns, Sam Howell more. Year three as a starter. Give him no line. Build around him. Draft this guy. And then Sam Howell. It's bye-bye, Fatso. Drake May time. Quit holding on to the ball. They're like the same quarterback is all I was going to tell you.
Yeah. Well,
I think Sam Howell. I don't know. I'm not a Justin Fields guy, but
I was gonna say he might be better, but I was gonna say they're completely different quarterbacks. I mean, Justin Fields might be the third best running quarterback in history of football after Michael Vick and Lamar Jackson, but he's just so bad at throwing the football that it doesn't even equate to anything.
Based on you freezing again and having no audio, I think it's just going to be a time to wrap this one up, because if I froze for a second, then you froze for a second, let's just call it a day.
Yeah, perfect.
But we gave our thoughts on the quick breaking of Sam Howell being traded to the Seahawks. It could mean something, and it could mean absolutely nothing. That is the conclusion of the thoughts on it. But please like and subscribe. Get to the podcast. If you're at work and you can't watch YouTube or something, you're watching this on later in the day. You can also subscribe to our podcast feed and get these type of videos as a podcast. And same for the podcast listeners. You can get these on YouTube on video at youtube.com/@SeattleOnTap. Everything I'm going to ever talk about, links are in descriptions on the podcast and on YouTube. So check them out. And we appreciate you guys tuning in today. George, you got anything else? Any other bold predictions?
No bold predictions. Just wrap it up before I freeze again. I don't know what's going on.
All right. Well, much love. And George, you know what we like to tell the people.
Thanks for stopping by. That's what we'll tell
Peace.
Sam Howell at the end of his Seahawks career. Thanks for stopping by, dude.
And being a starter for a year. Thank you. Peace.